the painting that fell. I was only supposed to dust the West Gallery before dinner. That was all. No one at the Moretti villa trusted a housekeeper with anything important, especially not a woman like me, Emma Carter, the quiet, curvy maid who kept her eyes down, her hands busy, and her opinions buried beneath a black uniform and a white apron. To the servants, I was useful. To the wealthy guests, I was invisible. To Chiara Vitale, the elegant woman, everyone expected Lorenzo Moretti to marry. I was a joke she enjoyed telling whenever she needed someone smaller to step on. But that night, while rain battered the windows of the Sicilian mansion and the most feared mafia boss in Italy entertained dangerous men downstairs, I climbed a small ladder to clean the portrait of his dead father. I touched the frame, and the entire painting slipped from the wall. Behind it was a hidden compartment. Inside was an old envelope sealed with the Moretti family crest. My hands shook as I opened it. The first words stopped my breath. Last will and testament of Vittorio Moretti. Then I read the next line, and my blood turned cold. If this document is found, then the person sitting at my son's table has already betrayed him. I should have put it back. I should have run. Instead, I kept reading, and that was the moment Lorenzo Moretti walked into the gallery and saw the secret will in my hands. Before that night, everyone in the villa believed they knew my place. I cleaned floors. I polished silver. I carried trays through rooms where men discussed fortunes, marriages, alliances, and punishments as if people were chess pieces. I had worked there for 11 months, long enough to understand that the Moretti family did not simply own land, companies, vineyards, shipping routes, and politicians. They owned fear. Lorenzo Moretti was the center of that fear. Tall, broad-shouldered, always dressed in black, with dark eyes that could silence a room without a word. He ruled the estate with the kind of calm that made violence feel unnecessary until it suddenly wasn't. People said he had no heart left after his father died and his family began tearing itself apart over inheritance. People said he trusted no one. People said he was engaged to Chiara only because her family's money could strengthen his empire. I believed all of it. Men like Lorenzo did not look at women like me unless something was wrong with the service. That evening, something was wrong with everything. The dinner began with crystal glasses, expensive wine, and smiles sharp enough to draw blood. I carried plates through the dining room, while Chiara laughed with Marco De Luca, Lorenzo's cousin, a handsome snake of a man who always looked like he knew where the bodies were buried because he had chosen the location. When I passed their table, Chiara lifted her glass and said loudly, "Careful, Emma. That tray looks heavy. We wouldn't want you crushing the family silver." The guests laughed. My cheeks burned, but I lowered my head. "Yes, signorina." Marco smiled lazily. "She is stronger than she looks. Garden girls, kitchen girls, house girls, they are built for labor." More laughter. I kept walking. Humiliation was an old coat. It never fit, but I had learned how to wear it. Only Rosa, the elderly cook, caught my wrist in the pantry and whispered, "One day, child, the people who treat you like dust will choke on it." I smiled because Rosa always tried to make me braver than I felt. Tonight, I only need to survive dessert. But after dessert, Mr. Bellini, the house manager, ordered me to clean the West Gallery before the guests moved there for brandy. His expression was tight, his voice impatient. "Do not touch anything important." I almost asked why he assigned me to a room filled entirely with important things, but I valued my job more than sarcasm. The West Gallery was colder than the rest of the villa, lined with portraits of dead Moretti men who all looked disappointed by the survival of other people. At the far end hung Vittorio Moretti's portrait, enormous, severe, framed in carved black wood. I climbed the ladder, lifted my cloth, and noticed the frame was slightly crooked. That bothered me. I remembered details. I always had. The frame had been straight that morning. I touched the lower edge to adjust it. The painting shifted. Then the hidden latch gave way. The whole portrait dropped forward with a heavy crack, and I barely caught it before it crashed onto the marble floor. My heart slammed against my ribs. Behind the painting, a narrow compartment sat open like a mouth. Inside lay the envelope. I stared at it for 10 seconds, maybe longer. Then curiosity, fear, and instinct made the decision my common sense refused to make. I took it out. The wax seal was old but unbroken. The Moretti crest pressed into it looked like a warning. I broke it anyway. The secret will inside was written in Vittorio's own hand. It changed everything. The public will, the one everyone knew, had given Lorenzo control of the empire and left smaller portions to Marco and other relatives. But this will said the public document had been altered. It said Lorenzo had been surrounded by traitors. It said the Vitali marriage contract was a trap. And then I reached the line that made the room tilt beneath me. The true heir is not the one they have placed beside my son, but the woman hidden in plain sight beneath my roof. My breath stopped. Woman hidden in plain sight. Beneath my roof. I heard a floorboard creak behind me. I turned too fast, the document trembling in my hand. Lorenzo stood in the doorway. The storm flashed white behind the windows. His eyes moved from the fallen portrait to the open compartment to the will clutched in my hands. The silence that followed felt like a blade pressed against my throat. "Emma," he said quietly, and the sound of my name in his voice frightened me more than shouting would have. "Tell me exactly what you found. The will that should not exist." Lorenzo Moretti did not step toward me at first, and somehow that made him more frightening. He stood in the doorway of the west gallery, while rain struck the tall windows behind the portraits, his black suit untouched by panic, his expression so still it made the room feel colder. I held the secret will against my chest as if paper could protect me from a man like him. The fallen portrait of Vittorio Moretti leaned heavily against the wall beside the ladder, the hidden compartment gaping open behind it, and I suddenly understood that I had not discovered a family document. I had discovered a death sentence. "I didn't steal it," I said before he could accuse me. My voice sounded small in the vast gallery. Lorenzo's eyes moved from the will to my face. "I know." That answer startled me more than anger would have. "You know?" "A thief runs." His gaze lowered to my trembling hands. "You froze." I swallowed. "That does not make me innocent." "No," he said quietly, "but it makes you honest enough to be afraid." He finally crossed the room, each step measured, every polished shoe striking the marble like a countdown. I wanted to back away, but the ladder blocked me and pride held me still. When he stopped in front of me, he extended one hand. The will. I gave it to him because refusing would have been stupid, and I had survived 11 months in this villa by knowing the difference between courage and stupidity. Lorenzo took the pages carefully. Not snatching, not threatening, simply claiming what carried his family name. His eyes scanned the first page. Nothing changed in his face. Then he reached the part about betrayal, and his jaw tightened. He continued reading. The gallery filled with the sound of rain, thunder, and my own heartbeat. Finally, he stopped on one line. "The true heir is not the one they have placed beside my son, but the woman hidden in plain sight beneath my roof." His eyes lifted slowly to me. For one terrible second, I thought he suspected me. Then he looked toward the corridor where the dinner guests laughed faintly downstairs. "Who else knows you found this?" "No one." "Did you read all of it?" "No." "How much?" I hesitated. Lying would be easy. Dying might be easier than lying badly to Lorenzo Moretti. "Enough to know someone has been lying to you." His expression went colder, but not toward me, toward the house, toward the people inside it. "Everyone lies to me." "Not like this." The words escaped before I could stop them. His attention returned to me, sharp and unsettling. "You speak with certainty. The will said the public inheritance was altered. It said the Vitali marriage contract was a trap. It said there was another heir. And you believe old paper because it was hidden behind a painting?" "No." I took a breath. "I believe it because the painting was moved tonight." The silence changed. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "I clean this gallery every Thursday and Sunday. The frame was straight this morning. Tonight it was crooked. Someone touched it before I did." For the first time, something like interest flickered in his expression. Not warmth, not trust. Interest. "You remember the position of frames?" "I remember anything I am blamed for when it is wrong." His eyes held mine for several seconds. I looked away first because I was a housekeeper and he was Lorenzo Moretti, but I hated that I had to. He folded the will once and placed it inside his jacket. "You will come with me." My stomach dropped. "Where?" "My study." "Sir, I have work." "Not anymore." "Mr. Bellini will notice." "Let him." The way he said it told me he wanted Bellini to notice. That should have frightened me more. Instead, it frightened me differently. Lorenzo lifted the fallen portrait back into place, covering the compartment, then guided me out through a side passage I had polished for months but never entered. Servants were not allowed in private corridors. We were expected to clean the edges of power without stepping into it. Tonight, Lorenzo opened a hidden door and brought me straight through. The passage smelled of cedar, stone, and rain. My shoes made almost no sound on the old runner carpet. His did not either. That disturbed me. Men that powerful should not move so quietly. When we reached his private study, he locked the door behind us. I stiffened. He noticed immediately. "I am not going to hurt you." I almost laughed. Men usually say that when they know they could. His gaze sharpened, and for a second I regretted everything about my mouth. Then he said, "Sit down, Emma." Hearing my name again made something strange happen inside my chest. Not because it was gentle. It wasn't. But because no one important in that house used my name unless they were correcting me. Lorenzo said it like he intended to remember it. I sat at the edge of the leather chair opposite his desk while he opened the will beneath a green-shaded lamp. The study was enormous and severe, with bookshelves climbing to the ceiling, maps of shipping routes framed on the walls, and a fire burning low in the hearth. On his desk sat neat stacks of contracts, a silver letter opener, and a photograph turned away from the room. He read silently for several minutes. Each page seemed to carve something deeper into his face. "This was written 2 weeks before my father died," he said at last. "The public will was signed 3 days after. Could someone have forged it?" "Yes. Do you think someone did?" He looked at the signature. "No." That answer made my blood colder. "Then it's real. Most likely." He turned another page, and his expression changed again. This time I saw it clearly. Shock. Brief, controlled, quickly buried, but real. "What?" I whispered before remembering I had no right to ask. Lorenzo stared at the page. "The will names a bloodline condition." "What does that mean?" He looked at me for a long moment, deciding whether I was useful enough to know or powerless enough to ignore. Finally, he said, "My father claims the true heir carries Moretti blood through a woman hidden inside this estate." My mouth went dry. "Inside the estate now?" That is what he wrote. "Chiara?" His mouth hardened. "Chiara is not hidden." True. Chiara Vitale was displayed like a jewel and sharpened like a knife. She belonged to every room because she behaved as if she owned them. "Then who?" I asked. Lorenzo did not answer. Before the silence could thicken further, 3 knocks sounded at the study door. Lorenzo's hand moved beneath the desk. I realized with a jolt that he kept a weapon there. "Who?" "Dante." The door opened to reveal Dante Russo, Lorenzo's security chief, broad-shouldered and grim, rainwater still on his dark coat. His eyes flicked to me, then to the sealed documents on the desk. He knew better than to ask questions in front of me. "We have a problem." Lorenzo stood. "Only one?" Dante's expression did not change. "Bellini is missing from the dining room." My stomach tightened. Bellini had sent me to the gallery. Bellini had ordered me to clean the room before guests entered. Bellini had told me not to touch anything important. Lorenzo's eyes moved to me, and I knew he had made the same connection. "Find him." "Already searching." Dante hesitated. "There is more." Lorenzo's patience thinned visibly. "Say it." Dante placed a small evidence bag on the desk. Inside was a torn strip of dark cloth, a brass key, and a folded note. Lorenzo opened the note with 2 fingers. His face turned lethal. "Read it," he said. Dante looked at me. Lorenzo did not. "Read it." Dante's voice lowered. The maid found the wall. The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lorenzo took the note back slowly, then looked at me with an expression that made the air disappear. Not suspicion. Protection sharpened into fury. Someone already knows. I could barely speak. "How?" "Because you were meant to find it," he said. My stomach dropped. "What?" Lorenzo looked toward the locked door, then the windows, then the villa beyond them, as if calculating every possible threat moving through his house. "The crooked painting. Bellini sending you there." "The note. Someone wanted the will discovered, but not by me first." I gripped the arms of the chair. Why me? Dante answered quietly. Because no one would believe a housekeeper. The words hurt because they were true. Lorenzo's eyes darkened. They miscalculated. For one impossible second, I thought he meant because he believed me. Because he saw me. Because my invisibility had finally failed someone else instead of me. Then the study phone rang. Lorenzo picked it up without taking his eyes off the door. He listened for 5 seconds. His face changed. Seal the east wing. He hung up. Dante straightened. What happened? Lorenzo looked at me. Someone opened my father's private archive. Dante swore under his breath. I stood before I realized I was moving. That's connected to the will. Lorenzo's gaze sharpened. Yes. Then Bellini isn't running away. My heart hammered, but the thought was clear. Terrifyingly clear. He's looking for the rest of it. Dante turned to Lorenzo. She may be right. Lorenzo studied me for several seconds, and in that silence I felt something shift. The mocked housekeeper, the invisible maid, the woman Chiara laughed at over dinner. Suddenly I was not furniture. I was a witness. Worse, I was useful. Lorenzo reached into his jacket, removed the will, and placed it inside a locked drawer. From this moment, Emma, you do not return to the servants' wing alone. I lifted my chin, though fear was climbing my spine. Is that an order? Yes. And if I refuse? His eyes held mine. Then I will ask politely while surrounding you with armed men. Dante made a sound that might have been a cough. I should have been offended. I was offended. I was also alive, and the note on his desk said someone wanted that to change. Before I could answer, shouting erupted beyond the corridor. A guard yelled for Dante. Footsteps thundered past the study. Lorenzo opened the door, and smoke drifted in from the hall. Not much. Just enough. My body went cold. Fire, Dante said. Lorenzo's face hardened. Where? A guard appeared at the end of the corridor, breathless. West Gallery. The room tilted. The painting. The hidden compartment. Whoever had used me to expose the will was already burning the place where I found it. Lorenzo turned to me, his voice low and absolute. Stay behind me. This time I did not argue, because somewhere inside the burning gallery, the truth was disappearing. And somewhere inside the villa, the person who made me find it was still watching. The room that remembered me. The West Gallery was burning by the time we reached the corridor, but the fire did not look accidental. It crawled too neatly along the old wood paneling, too hungry around the space where Vittorio Moretti's portrait had hung, too focused on the wall that had hidden the will for years. Smoke rolled beneath the ceiling in gray waves, and servants shouted from the far staircase while guards dragged guests away from the danger. Lorenzo stepped in front of me before I could see too much, one arm blocking my path as Dante barked orders into his radio. No one enters. The compartment, I said, coughing as smoke scratched my throat. There might be something else inside. Lorenzo's head turned slightly. I said no one enters. You also said Bellini is looking for the rest of it. His eyes flashed, dark and furious. And you think that means I will let you run into a fire? I didn't say let me. Dante made another sound that was definitely not a cough this time. But Lorenzo ignored him. A section of burning frame collapsed inside the gallery with a sharp crack, sparks bursting across the marble floor. My courage retreated immediately. Apparently my body understood danger better than my mouth did. Lorenzo gave one look to 2 guards, and they moved forward with fire blankets and extinguishers, while the household staff retreated behind a line of armed men. The entire estate had transformed within minutes from a mansion full of dinner guests into a fortress under attack. What frightened me most was not the flames. It was the precision. Someone had lit the fire exactly where the evidence had been. Someone knew exactly how to make the truth disappear. 10 minutes later, the worst of the flames had been beaten down, leaving the West Gallery blackened, soaked, and stinking of smoke. Vittorio's portrait was ruined. The hidden compartment was charred but still visible. Lorenzo stepped inside first despite Dante's protest, then turned back and looked at me. Stay close. It was not permission. It was surrender disguised as command. I followed carefully, lifting my skirt away from puddles of ash and water. The room where I had dusted portraits less than an hour before now looked like a battlefield. Gold frames hung crooked. A cracked mirror reflected smoke. The marble floor was littered with burned plaster. At the far end, the empty compartment behind the ruined portrait had been almost completely destroyed. Almost. I crouched before Lorenzo could stop me and saw something wedged beneath a loose stone inside the wall. There. Dante knelt and pulled it free with gloved fingers. It was a small brass plate, blackened at the edges, engraved with 3 letters. E.M.B. Lorenzo went absolutely still. I looked from the plate to his face. You know what that means. He did not answer. Dante did. Quietly. Emilia Moretti. Belandi. The name meant nothing to me, and yet somehow it made the air change. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. That name has not been spoken in this house for 28 years. My heart began beating faster. Who was she? Lorenzo stared at the brass plate as if it were an old wound reopened by fire. A child who died before she was 2. The answer should have ended the matter. Instead, it opened something darker. Then why would your father hide her initials behind the will? Lorenzo's eyes lifted to mine, and this time I saw something I never expected from him. Not fear exactly, but the shadow of it. That is the question. Before I could speak, a young maid rushed into the gallery entrance, face pale, apron twisted in her hands. Signor Moretti. Dante turned sharply. I told everyone to stay out. The girl flinched. I'm sorry, but it is about Mr. Bellini. Lorenzo stepped away from the wall. What about him? His room is empty. We know he is missing. No, signore. Her voice shook. I mean empty. His clothes are gone. His safe is open. And there was this. She held out a folded piece of paper with trembling fingers. Dante took it, checked it quickly, then handed it to Lorenzo. Lorenzo read the note. His expression hardened into something that made even the smoke seem to retreat. What does it say? I asked, because apparently near death had not taught me silence. Lorenzo gave me the paper. 3 lines, written in the same hand as the earlier message. The maid is the key, because she sees what you do not. The dead girl is not dead. Find the nursery before Bellini does. My fingers went numb. The dead girl is not dead. Find the nursery. Lorenzo took the note back, and for the first time since I had entered his world of hidden corridors and burning walls, I saw the control around him fracture. Just slightly. Enough. Dante. Dante was already moving. West Tower? Now. What nursery? I asked. Lorenzo looked at me as though he was deciding again whether I was a liability or a necessary witness. Then he said, there was a nursery in the West Tower. It was sealed after Emilia died. And Bellini knows about it? Bellini knows everything that happened inside this house. That answer chilled me more than the smoke. We left the gallery through a servant's passage I had never been allowed to use. The West Tower rose from the oldest part of the villa, narrow and cold, built from pale stone that held dampness like memory. I had cleaned the lower halls before, but never the upper rooms. Bellini had always said they were private storage. The staircase curled upward through stale air and shadows, each step making my nerves tighten. Lorenzo moved ahead of me, Dante behind, 2 guards following. I hated being surrounded. I hated needing it more. At the 3rd landing, Lorenzo stopped before a blue-painted door with a tarnished silver lock. The paint was old, faded, peeling around the edges. For reasons I could not explain, my chest tightened when I saw it. A strange pressure built behind my ribs. Not recognition. Not exactly. More like the room had been waiting for me to arrive. Dante tried the handle. Locked. Lorenzo held out his hand, and one of the guards gave him a key ring recovered from Bellini's office. The 3rd key turned. The door opened with a soft groan. Inside was the nursery. Dust covered everything. But beneath the decay, the room remained heartbreakingly preserved. A small white crib stood near the window. A rocking horse faced the sea. Shelves held porcelain animals. Pale blue wallpaper curled from the walls, patterned with tiny white flowers. Near the crib, a child's blanket lay folded beneath glass, as if someone had once been afraid even time would steal it. I stepped inside and felt the floor disappear beneath memory I did not have. My hand went to my chest. Lorenzo noticed instantly. Emma? I'm fine. A lie. Not a good one. He watched me for another second before turning to Dante. Search everything. They began with the wardrobe. Baby clothes, embroidered blankets, tiny shoes. Everything marked with EMB Emilia Moretti Belandi. A dead child who might not be dead. A hidden will. A maid who noticed crooked paintings. My skin prickled. Dante opened a lower drawer and found a silver rattle, a faded baptism ribbon, and a sealed medical envelope. Lorenzo took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a photograph of a baby in a white gown, a woman with dark hair holding her, and Vittorio Moretti standing stiffly beside them. On the back was written, Emilia, protected by blood, endangered by blood. Lorenzo stared at the photograph. This is my Aunt Isabella, he said quietly. Emilia's mother? Yes. What happened to her? She died the same year. Of course she did. Everyone in this family seemed to die when secrets became inconvenient. I moved toward the crib because something beneath it had caught my eye. A box, small, wooden, pushed far back against the wall. I knelt and pulled it out. The lid was carved with the same initials. EMB. Lorenzo came beside me. Careful. I opened it. Inside lay a blue ribbon, a tiny gold bracelet, and a folded paper so old it nearly tore when Dante lifted it. The paper was not a will. It was a household staff record from 26 years earlier. One name had been circled in black ink, Ann Carter. My mother. For several seconds, the room made no sound at all. Not the guards, not the rain, not my breathing. My mother's name stared up at me from a secret nursery inside a mafia villa in Sicily, written years before I was born, years before she told me she had never left America, except once as a young woman, and refused to say why. Lorenzo's voice came from very far away. Emma. I shook my head. No. Do you know this woman? My throat closed. She was my mother. Dante muttered something under his breath. Lorenzo did not move. Was? She died 3 years ago. My eyes burned, but no tears came. Not yet. Shock held them back. Why is her name here? No one answered. There was no answer that would not destroy something. Dante turned the paper over. More handwriting appeared on the back, smaller, hurried, nearly faded. If the child survives, she must never know the name Emilia until the traitors are dead. My knees weakened. Lorenzo caught my elbow before I fell, his grip firm but careful. I should have pulled away. I did not. The nursery walls seemed to breathe around me. The crib, the blue ribbon, the name. Ann Carter, Emma Carter, Emilia. No, impossible. My mother was a nurse, a widow, a tired woman who made soup when I was sick and cried during old movies. She was not part of a mafia inheritance. She had not stolen or hidden or protected a dead girl. She had raised me, loved me, lied to me. The thought struck so hard I almost bent from it. Before any of us could speak, glass shattered downstairs. A gunshot cracked through the tower. The guard spun toward the door. Dante drew his weapon. Lorenzo pulled me behind him so fast my shoulder hit his chest. Another shot. Then a man shouted from below, "Bellini is in the tower!" Lorenzo's eyes turned lethal, but I barely heard it, because at that exact moment the nursery window blew open in the storm wind, scattering papers from the wooden box across the floor, and one small photograph landed at my feet. I picked it up with shaking hands. It showed my mother, younger than I had ever seen her, holding a baby wrapped in the blue ribbon from the box. On the back, in faded ink, were 4 words. Emma must stay hidden. The woman they tried to erase. The photograph slipped from my trembling fingers onto the nursery floor, but I already knew what I had seen. My mother, 26 years younger, holding a baby wrapped in the same blue ribbon resting inside the wooden box. On the back, 4 words written in fading ink had shattered every certainty I had ever carried through life. Emma must stay hidden. Another gunshot echoed somewhere below the West Tower, followed by shouted orders and the pounding of boots on stone stairs. Dante raised his pistol immediately, while 2 guards rushed toward the hallway. Lorenzo never took his eyes off me. I realized then that he was no longer looking at a frightened housekeeper. He was looking at a mystery that had somehow walked into his villa wearing an apron. "Emma," he said quietly. Look at me. I tried. I truly tried. But every memory of my childhood was suddenly rearranging itself inside my mind. My mother's refusal to discuss my father. The old photographs she kept locked inside a cedar chest. The nights she woke screaming after nightmares she refused to explain. The day she burned an entire box of letters in our backyard and told me some truths were too dangerous to survive. I thought she was grieving. Now I wondered if she had been hiding. Lorenzo stepped closer but stopped before entering my space completely. "Can you breathe?" I nodded automatically. He didn't believe me. "Emma?" His voice softened in a way I had not thought possible. Slowly. I inhaled once. Then again. The room steadied just enough for me to stand without falling. Dante returned from the hallway, expression grim. Bellini escaped. Lorenzo closed his eyes briefly. Casualties? 2 guards wounded. 1 servant injured. Bellini used the confusion from the fire. Lorenzo swore under his breath. Seal the grounds. Dante nodded. Already done. Then he noticed the photograph in my hands. What happened? Lorenzo answered without looking away from me. Her mother's name was inside the nursery. Dante's face changed instantly. Ann Carter? Yes. Silence. Heavy. Knowing. I looked between them. You both know something. Neither man answered immediately. That frightened me more than the gunfire. Finally, Dante exhaled slowly. 26 years ago, your mother worked here. My stomach tightened. No. She did. She was a nurse in Vermont. Dante's expression remained sympathetic but firm. Later. My heartbeat accelerated. You're saying she lived here? Lorenzo answered this time. According to my father's employment records, Ann Carter arrived as Amelia's private nanny 6 months before the child disappeared. Disappeared, not died. The distinction struck me immediately. You said, Amelia died. Lorenzo looked toward the empty crib. That is what everyone was told. I stared at the tiny blanket folded beneath the glass case. But this note says the dead girl isn't dead. Nobody spoke. Because nobody could explain it. Dante carefully collected the photograph, the ribbon, and the documents into evidence folders. We'll preserve everything. I barely heard him. My attention remained fixed on the nursery. The pale blue walls. The faded wallpaper. The rocking horse facing the sea. Somehow the room felt familiar, not remembered. Felt like a song whose melody lived somewhere beneath conscious thought. My feet moved before I realized I had decided to walk. I crossed to the window overlooking the cliffs. The sea crashed against the rocks far below. Wind carried salt through the broken glass. Then something caught my eye. The windowsill. Tiny carved marks, almost invisible beneath layers of paint. I leaned closer. 4 vertical scratches. Then another 4. Then another. Someone had carved tally marks into the wood. Lorenzo. He joined me. What is it? I pointed. These weren't made by a carpenter. He examined them silently. No. A child? He ran one finger carefully over the grooves. Perhaps. Dante looked over as well. Or someone counting days. My skin prickled. Days. Waiting. Hoping. Trapped. Before anyone could speculate further, Rosa appeared breathless in the doorway. Her gray hair had escaped its bun, and soot stained her apron. Signore. Lorenzo turned. Rosa. She hesitated when she saw me holding the old photograph. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Oh, dear God. My pulse jumped. You recognize it? Rosa covered her mouth. Lorenzo's voice became very quiet. Tell us. She looked at me for several long seconds, then whispered. She has her mother's eyes. Silence crashed over the room. I frowned. My mother's? Rosa slowly shook her head. No. She pointed toward the photograph. Emilia's. My entire body went cold. What? Rosa began crying openly. I've never forgotten those eyes. Lorenzo stepped closer. Rosa. She wiped her tears unsuccessfully. I held that little girl every afternoon while Anne prepared her bottles. My mind refused to process the sentence. Little girl, Amelia, Anne, my mother, Rosa. Lorenzo's voice sharpened. Are you saying Emma resembles Amelia? Rosa nodded through tears. She always has. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the crib to steady myself. Lorenzo reached toward me instinctively but stopped halfway, uncertain whether touching me would help or make things worse. Emma. I laughed once. The sound frightened me. This is insane. Nobody argued. You're telling me my mother worked here. Silence. That she cared for a child named Amelia. Silence. That child supposedly died. Silence. Now someone leaves notes saying the dead girl isn't dead. Silence. And Rosa thinks I look like her. My voice cracked. Do you hear yourselves? Lorenzo finally answered. Every word. Then say it's impossible. He didn't. That hurt more than agreement. Dante's phone vibrated. He answered immediately, listened for several seconds, then looked toward Lorenzo. The laboratory finished the ink analysis on the secret will. Lorenzo frowned. Already? Priority processing. Results? Dante lowered the phone slowly. The will is authentic. Nobody moved. And? Lorenzo asked. Dante's expression darkened. The final page was amended. My heartbeat accelerated again. Amended? Dante nodded. The original handwriting belongs to Vittorio Moretti. But one sentence was added later by someone else. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed dangerously. Which sentence? Dante looked directly at me before answering. The one about the woman hidden beneath this roof. Silence swallowed the nursery. Everything stopped. The entire mystery shifted. If Vittorio hadn't written that line, then someone inserted it after his death. Someone wanted Lorenzo searching for a woman. Someone wanted attention drawn toward me, or toward Amelia, or both. Lorenzo's face hardened into stone. Who altered it? Dante shook his head. Not enough sample yet. Find out. Already working. I turned slowly toward the old portrait of the Virgin Mary hanging above the crib. Something about it felt wrong. Crooked. Slightly uneven. The same feeling I had experienced with Vittorio's portrait before discovering the hidden compartment. My pulse quickened. Lorenzo. He followed my gaze. What? I pointed toward the painting. That frame. He looked carefully. Then without hesitation crossed the room and lifted it from the wall. Behind it was another hidden compartment, smaller than the first. Inside rested a single object. An old silver locket shaped like a lily. Rosa gasped. Dante froze. Lorenzo stared without touching it. What is it? I whispered. Rosa answered through tears. Amelia never took that locket off. Lorenzo slowly opened the compartment and lifted the necklace into his palm. The silver had tarnished with age, but the tiny engraved initials remained visible. E.M.B. Amelia Moretti Belandi. My hands trembled. Open it. Lorenzo hesitated only a moment before pressing the hidden clasp. The locket clicked open. Inside were two miniature photographs. One showed baby Amelia smiling in Anne Carter's arms. The second showed Anne standing beside a man whose face had been deliberately cut away with a blade. But beneath the damaged photograph lay another folded note. Lorenzo unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was different from the will, different from the earlier warning. Neater, more feminine. He read silently. Then all color drained from his face. What? I asked. He looked at me as though the words physically hurt to speak. It's from my mother. Silence, she wrote. He stopped. His voice failed completely. Dante took the paper gently and finished reading aloud. If anything happens to Amelia, trust Anne, even if the whole world tells you not to. My knees nearly gave out. Because for the first time since the painting fell, I understood one terrible truth. My mother had never simply worked for the Moretti family. She had been trusted by them, deeply trusted, enough to disappear with their child if necessary, enough to spend the rest of her life protecting a secret worth killing for. And somewhere beyond the walls of the villa, Bellini was still searching for whatever remained hidden before we could uncover it first. The woman under Lorenzo's protection. I could not stop staring at my mother's photograph. Ann Carter smiled gently as she held the baby wrapped in the blue ribbon, completely unaware that decades later her daughter would be standing inside the same nursery trying to understand whether every memory of her childhood had been built upon a lie. Lorenzo carefully folded the handwritten note from his mother and placed it inside his jacket alongside the secret will. His movements were controlled, but I had begun to recognize the signs beneath that control. The tighter he appeared, the more dangerous the situation truly was. Dante finished photographing every document and sealed the nursery box inside an evidence case. "Nothing leaves my custody," he said quietly. Lorenzo nodded. "Double the security." Dante hesitated. "For the documents?" Lorenzo looked directly at me. "For Miss Carter." The room fell silent. Even Rosa lifted her head in surprise. I frowned. "That isn't necessary." Lorenzo's attention never left me. "Someone burned half my gallery after you found the will. Because of the documents. Because of you." I opened my mouth to argue, but no words came. He continued calmly. "The first note mentioned the maid." He held up one finger. "The second note mentioned your mother." A second finger. "The third hidden compartment contained a photograph of your mother holding the child everyone believes died." A third finger. "Do you truly believe you are no longer involved?" I hated how logical he sounded. "That doesn't mean they'll come after me," Dante answered before Lorenzo could. "If Bellini believes you know where the rest of the evidence is, he won't hesitate." Rosa crossed herself quietly. "God protect this poor child." Child. At 28 years old, nobody had called me that in years. Somehow hearing Rosa say, it made the fear more real. Lorenzo turned toward Dante. "Move Emma out of the servants' quarters." I blinked. "Excuse me? You're not sleeping there tonight." "Where exactly am I supposed to sleep?" He answered without hesitation. "The East Guest Suite." Every servant in Italy knew what that meant. The East Wing wasn't for employees. It was reserved for family members, diplomats, judges, and the occasional foreign minister. Absolutely not. Lorenzo looked mildly surprised that I had refused him. "No? I am a housekeeper." "Temporarily." The single word caught me completely off guard. "Temporarily? Until we discover why your mother appears in my family's hidden records." I folded my arms. "I'm still not staying upstairs." "Why?" "Because every servant in this house already thinks I'm suspicious." "Good." I frowned. "Good? If they think you're important, Bellini's allies will reveal themselves by watching you." Dante almost smiled. "He's using you as bait." Lorenzo didn't deny it. "With protection?" I stared at him in disbelief. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "It should make you feel alive." I wanted to throw something at him. Unfortunately, I also knew he was probably right. Before I could answer, one of Dante's guards entered the nursery carrying a burned leather folder recovered from Bellini's office. "We found this hidden beneath the floorboards." Dante accepted it carefully. "Damage?" "Mostly smoke." Lorenzo opened the folder. Inside were dozens of old employment files from the estate. Gardeners, drivers, maids, nannies, secretaries. Every file contained handwritten notes. Most seemed ordinary. Then Lorenzo stopped turning pages. His expression hardened immediately. "Emma." I stepped closer. He handed me one file. Ann Carter. My mother's employment record. My hands began trembling before I even opened it. The first page matched what Dante had described. Arrival date, duties, references, languages spoken, medical training. Then came the handwritten observations. Exceptionally loyal, trusted by Signora Isabella, cleared for nursery access, authorized by Vittorio personally. I swallowed hard. My mother had not been an ordinary employee. She had been trusted by the head of the Moretti family himself. Lorenzo turned another page. Both of us froze. The final evaluation had been stamped in red ink. Status: deceased. I stared at the word. "No." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "Interesting." "Interesting?" I almost laughed. "My mother didn't die here." Exactly. Dante looked over Lorenzo's shoulder. Someone officially declared Ann Carter dead 26 years ago. Rosa gasped softly. My pulse pounded in my ears. But she raised me. Lorenzo nodded once, meaning someone erased her from history before she disappeared. The implications settled over the room like smoke. My mother had lived under a false identity for most of my life. She never told me, never explained, never even hinted. Had every birthday been celebrated under a borrowed name? Had every school record been false? Had my entire existence depended upon a secret I wasn't supposed to survive? Dante interrupted my thoughts. There's another document. He carefully unfolded a folded page hidden behind the employment record. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten by Vittorio Moretti himself. If Ann Carter ever disappears, trust no official report. She will only run if Amelia remains alive. Lorenzo slowly lowered the page. Nobody breathed. Rosa whispered first. Dear Lord. I felt my knees weaken again. Lorenzo reached out instinctively, steadying my arm before I lost my balance. This time I didn't pull away. I couldn't. My body refused to cooperate with pride anymore. His grip was firm, surprisingly gentle. Sit. It wasn't an order. It almost sounded like concern. I allowed him to guide me into the old rocking chair beside the nursery window. For several moments nobody spoke. Rain continued tapping softly against the glass, while wind carried the scent of the sea through the broken window. Finally I whispered, She lied to me. Rosa knelt beside me. No, dear. Tears blurred my vision. She told me my father died before I was born. Perhaps she believed protecting you mattered more than telling you everything. She let me believe we were ordinary. Lorenzo answered quietly. Perhaps that was the greatest gift she could give you. I looked up at him. His expression remained serious, but something had changed. The distance he maintained earlier was disappearing. Not entirely. Just enough for me to notice. Before I could respond, Dante's phone rang again. He answered immediately. Russo. Silence. Then his face darkened. Understood. Lorenzo recognized the look instantly. What happened? Dante lowered the phone. Bellini has contacted someone. Who? Chiara Vitale. Every muscle in Lorenzo's body tightened. Mine did too. Chiara. The elegant woman who humiliated me during dinner. The woman expected to become Lorenzo's wife. The woman named in the secret will as part of a trap. Lorenzo spoke carefully. Proof? Dante handed him a photograph sent from surveillance. Grainy but unmistakable. Bellini entering Chiara's private villa less than 30 minutes earlier. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. She knew. Dante nodded. Looks that way. My stomach turned. Then she knew about the will. Lorenzo looked toward me, possibly before anyone else. I remembered every mocking smile Chiara had given me since I started working here, every unnecessary insult, every reminder that I belonged beneath everyone else. Had she already known I mattered somehow? Had she been watching me all along? Lorenzo suddenly closed the employment folder and handed it back to Dante. Move Emma now. I sighed. We're discussing this again? He met my eyes steadily. No, Lorenzo. It was the first time I had spoken his name instead of calling him Signore. Neither of us acknowledged it. Emma, he replied just as quietly. Someone erased your mother from history. Silence. Someone altered my father's will. More silence. Someone burned part of my home tonight. His gaze never left mine. And now the woman I intended to marry is secretly meeting the man who sent you into the gallery. He stepped one pace closer. You are no longer my employee. My heartbeat accelerated. Then what am I? He answered without hesitation. My responsibility. The words hung between us. Dante discreetly looked away. Rosa smiled through fresh tears. I should have objected. Instead, I simply stared at Lorenzo, trying to understand why the most feared man in Sicily suddenly sounded less like a mafia boss and more like someone making a promise. Before either of us could speak again, another guard rushed breathlessly into the nursery. Signor! Lorenzo turned instantly. Report. We searched Bellini's office again. And? The guard held up a small brass key tagged with faded handwriting. Lorenzo took it. The label read only 3 words: family crypt, lower level. Everyone in the room went silent. Rosa slowly crossed herself again. Dante looked toward Lorenzo. Your father sealed the crypt 20 years ago. Lorenzo stared at the old key. Apparently someone has been opening it anyway. Then he looked directly at me. I think your mother left us one final secret. My pulse quickened. In the crypt? He nodded once. And if Bellini couldn't destroy the evidence in the gallery, he closed his fingers around the ancient key. He'll be waiting for us beneath the villa. The secret beneath. The crypt midnight settled over the Moretti estate like a funeral veil. The storm had finally begun to weaken, leaving the marble terraces soaked with rain while low clouds drifted across the moon. Every corridor inside the villa echoed with hurried footsteps as Lorenzo's security team searched for Bellini, but the man had vanished as if the house itself had swallowed him. I stood outside the entrance to the family chapel wearing a borrowed dark coat over my housekeeper's uniform. It felt strange to wear something that belonged to the estate's private guests instead of the servants' quarters. Stranger still was the fact that Lorenzo himself had insisted I put it on. The crypt is cold, he had said simply. You'll need it. No one had ever worried whether I was cold before. That realization lingered uncomfortably inside me as Lorenzo approached, accompanied by Dante and 4 heavily armed guards. In his hand rested the old brass key taken from Bellini's office. Family crypt. Lower level. A single forgotten key had somehow become the center of every mystery surrounding my mother, the secret will, and a child believed dead for more than 25 years. Lorenzo stopped beside me. Are you ready? I looked toward the ancient stone chapel standing beneath the cypress trees. No. To my surprise, he nodded. Neither am I. Somehow that honesty steadied me more than false confidence could have. Dante pushed open the heavy oak doors, and the scent of incense and old stone drifted outward. The chapel was beautiful despite the darkness. White marble columns framed the altar. Stained glass windows filtered pale moonlight across the floor, and dozens of candles burned before statues of forgotten saints. At first glance, it appeared peaceful. Then Lorenzo walked directly past the altar. Behind it stood an enormous stone monument dedicated to Vittorio Moretti and generations of his ancestors. Dante inserted the brass key into an iron lock hidden within the monument's base. It resisted at first, then turned with a deep metallic groan that echoed through the chapel. The stone shifted. Dust poured from ancient seams as a hidden doorway slowly opened beneath the monument. Cold air rushed upward, carrying the smell of earth untouched for decades. Stay close, Lorenzo said quietly. This time, I didn't argue. The staircase descended deep beneath the chapel, lit only by Dante's flashlight and the lantern carried by one of the guards. Every step echoed through the narrow passage. The walls were carved from solid stone, lined with old family names and faded religious symbols. Halfway down, I noticed something unusual. Fresh footprints. Not ours. Lorenzo noticed them at exactly the same moment. He crouched beside the marks, touching the damp stone. Less than an hour old. Dante immediately raised his weapon. Bellini. Lorenzo nodded once. He's ahead of us. We continued downward with greater caution. My heartbeat grew louder with every step until I could barely hear anything else. Finally, the staircase opened into the Moretti family crypt. I expected rows of coffins and silence. Instead, I found an underground chamber far larger than the chapel above. Marble tombs lined the walls beneath vaulted ceilings supported by carved pillars. Candles burned unexpectedly bright near the center of the room. Someone had lit them recently. Lorenzo moved toward the central tomb. His father's name was engraved across polished white marble. Vittorio Moretti. Beloved father, protector, builder. Something immediately felt wrong. One of the candles had been knocked over. Wax still dripped onto the stone floor. Dante swept the flashlight across the chamber. He's been here. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Somewhere deeper inside the crypt. Everyone froze. Lorenzo signaled silently. 2 guards moved left. 2 moved right. Dante advanced toward the sound while Lorenzo instinctively positioned himself between me and the darkness. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned. Then an old man's voice echoed softly through the crypt. "You're too late." Lorenzo recognized it instantly. Bellini. The former house manager stepped from behind a stone pillar carrying a lantern in one hand and a revolver in the other. He looked exhausted, dirty, older than he had only hours earlier. Yet his eyes remained sharp. "Don't come any closer." Lorenzo's expression became unreadable. "This ends tonight." Bellini laughed sadly. "No." He glanced toward me. "It ends with her." Every guard immediately raised their weapons. Lorenzo's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "Put the gun down." Bellini ignored him. Instead, he looked directly at me. "You have your mother's face." My pulse quickened. "You knew Ann Carter?" His expression softened unexpectedly. "I loved her." The confession stunned everyone. Even Lorenzo blinked. Bellini continued before anyone could interrupt. "Not the way you're thinking." His eyes filled briefly with regret. "She was the only decent person left in this house." My throat tightened. "Then why hide from me?" "Because she begged me never to let anyone find you." Lorenzo stepped forward. "Enough riddles." Bellini slowly nodded. "Very well." He pointed toward Vittorio's tomb. "Open it." Silence crashed over the crypt. Dante frowned. "What?" Bellini repeated himself. "Open Vittorio Moretti's tomb." Lorenzo stared at him. "Explain." Bellini's tired smile returned. "Your father was never buried there." No one moved. I could hear my own heartbeat. Lorenzo looked at Dante. "Break it open." Within moments, 2 guards rolled aside the heavy marble lid, using iron tools stored nearby. Stone scraped against stone. Dust filled the chamber. Finally, the tomb opened completely. It was empty. Completely empty. Rosa's prayers, my mother's hidden identity, the secret will, the mysterious child, every impossible revelation suddenly seemed almost believable, because the man everyone had buried wasn't inside his grave. Lorenzo stood motionless, staring into the empty tomb. "Impossible." Bellini shook his head. "No." His voice trembled. "Necessary." Dante turned sharply. "Where is Vittorio?" Bellini answered without hesitation. "Alive." Every sound inside the crypt disappeared. My breathing stopped completely. Lorenzo's father, the man declared dead 26 years ago. The author of the secret will. Alive. Lorenzo slowly looked toward Bellini. "You're lying." Bellini lowered the revolver slightly. "I wish I were." Then he reached inside his coat and removed a faded photograph. He tossed it onto the stone floor between us. Lorenzo picked it up. I leaned close enough to see. The photograph had been taken less than a year earlier. An elderly man with white hair sat in a wheelchair beside a small stone cottage overlooking the sea. Though older, thinner, and weaker, his face was unmistakable. Vittorio Moretti, alive. Lorenzo's hands began trembling for the first time since I had known him. "Where?" Bellini opened his mouth to answer. A gunshot exploded through the crypt. Bellini staggered backward. Blood spread across his chest. I screamed. Dante spun toward the darkness beyond the pillars. Another shot shattered one of the candles. Guards returned fire immediately as bullets ricocheted through ancient stone. Lorenzo threw me behind the nearest marble tomb, covering me with his own body while chaos erupted throughout the chamber. "Stay down!" he shouted. I clutched the cold marble, heart hammering wildly. More gunfire echoed through the crypt. Someone screamed. Then silence. Heavy, terrible silence. Lorenzo slowly lifted his head. Bellini lay motionless several yards away. His lantern flickered beside him. Blood spread across the ancient stone floor. Dante cautiously searched the shadows, with his weapon raised. Shooter escaped. Lorenzo hurried to Bellini's side, dropping to one knee. I followed despite every instinct telling me not to. Bellini was still breathing, barely. Blood stained his shirt with every shallow breath. He looked at me first. Then Lorenzo. "Listen." His voice was almost gone. Lorenzo leaned closer. "Who shot you?" Bellini coughed painfully. "Not. Chiara." My pulse jumped. Who then? Bellini's fading eyes found mine one last time. Your mother. He struggled for breath. Didn't hide. Amelia. Another cough. Blood touched his lips. She. Hid. His voice disappeared completely. Lorenzo gripped his shoulder. Bellini. The old man summoned the last of his strength. One final whisper escaped. She hid. You. His eyes locked onto mine. Then the light inside them vanished forever. The crypt fell completely silent. I stared at Bellini's lifeless face, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to understand the final words he had carried to his grave. My mother didn't hide Amelia. She hid. The girl who never died. Bellini's final words echoed through the crypt, long after the old man's heartbeat stopped. She hid. You. I knelt beside his body, unable to move, while Lorenzo slowly closed Bellini's eyes with surprising gentleness. Whatever crimes the former house manager had committed, death erased the possibility of further answers. Somewhere inside the darkness, beyond the crypt, the unknown assassin had escaped, leaving behind one corpse and a mystery so impossible that my mind refused to accept it. My mother hadn't hidden Amelia. She had hidden me. The sentence made no sense. It couldn't, unless everything I believed about my own identity was wrong. Dante stood and spoke quietly into his radio, ordering every exit from the estate sealed. Additional guards flooded the chapel above while forensic teams began descending into the crypt. None of it mattered. Bellini's killer had planned this perfectly. He had waited until the truth reached the edge of revelation, then silenced the only witness who understood it completely. Lorenzo remained standing beside me, staring at the blood-stained stone floor with an expression I could no longer read. His anger had transformed into something colder, more focused. "We leave," he said finally. I looked up at him. "Leave? This crypt is now a crime scene. But Bellini is gone." His voice remained steady despite everything. "The answers aren't." I wanted to argue. Instead, I allowed him to help me stand. His hand remained beneath my elbow longer than necessary, perhaps because he realized my legs were still shaking. Neither of us mentioned it. Back inside the villa, dawn began creeping over the Mediterranean. The storm had passed, leaving the estate unnaturally quiet. Servants whispered in corners. Guards doubled their patrols. Smoke still lingered faintly from the burned west gallery. Everything felt different now. The house no longer seemed merely wealthy or intimidating. It felt haunted by truths buried too long. Lorenzo ordered breakfast served in his private study rather than the dining room. Rosa insisted I eat despite my complete lack of appetite. "Your mother would scold me if I let you faint," she said softly while placing tea before me. The simple mention of my mother nearly broke me again. Lorenzo noticed. He dismissed everyone except Dante. For several minutes, the three of us sat silently while sunlight filtered through the tall windows. Finally, Lorenzo opened Bellini's recovered folder once more. "Let's begin again." End of 725. Dante spread the documents across the desk. Employment files, estate maps, old correspondence, Bellini's handwritten notes. Then Lorenzo placed 3 items side by side. The secret will, the nursery photograph of my mother holding the baby, the silver lily locket. "Everything points toward one question," he said quietly. "Who are you?" I laughed bitterly. "I've been asking myself the same thing." Dante slid another document forward. "We searched Bellini's apartment completely." Lorenzo looked up. "Find anything useful?" Dante nodded. "One locked safe. Contents? A birth certificate." My pulse quickened. Lorenzo extended his hand. Dante gave him the folded document. Lorenzo read it once, then again. His face became unreadable. "What?" I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he passed the certificate to me. My hands trembled before I even unfolded it. Birth certificate. Name: Emilia Vittoria Moretti, Belandi. Date of birth: October 12. Place of birth: Palermo, Sicily. Mother's name: Isabella Moretti, Belandi. Father's name: confidential by court order. Then my eyes reached the final line. Distinguishing mark: small crescent-shaped birthmark behind the left shoulder. My breath stopped completely. Slowly, almost mechanically, I raised my hand to the back of my shoulder, to the place I had hidden beneath clothing my entire life. The tiny, crescent-shaped birthmark my mother always kissed when I was little. My fingers went numb. Lorenzo noticed immediately. "Emma?" I couldn't speak. Instead, I carefully pulled the collar of my blouse aside just enough to expose the mark. Silence consumed the room. Dante looked away first. Lorenzo didn't. He stared at the birthmark for several endless seconds before quietly closing his eyes. When he opened them again, nothing in his expression remained unchanged. "Dear God." My voice barely existed. "What does this mean?" Lorenzo answered honestly. "It means Bellini wasn't lying." The room tilted around me. "No, Emma, no." I stood so suddenly my chair crashed backward. "There has to be another explanation." Dante remained calm. "Birthmarks can repeat." Hope flickered briefly inside me, then Dante continued. "But the odds are extremely low." Hope disappeared. I walked toward the window because the walls suddenly felt too close. Outside, gardeners had already begun clearing storm debris from the olive groves. For one absurd moment I wanted to join them, dig holes, trim hedges, pretend yesterday still existed. Lorenzo approached carefully. "Emma, don't." He stopped immediately. My voice broke. "I need one thing to stay true." Tears finally came. My mother. Lorenzo remained silent. "She loved me." "Yes." "She raised me." "Yes." "She was my mother." His answer came without hesitation. "Always." I turned toward him. "Even if." I couldn't finish. He did. "Even if you were born Emilia Moretti." Silence. The name hung between us like a ghost. Emilia. Not Emma. My mother had chosen Emma. She had whispered it during bedtime stories, written it on birthday cakes, sewn it into school uniforms. Emma Carter. The name belonged to love. Emilia belonged to secrets. Before anyone could speak again, another knock sounded at the study door. Dante opened it. One of the younger guards entered carrying a sealed envelope. "This arrived 10 minutes ago." Lorenzo frowned. "From whom?" "No return address." Dante inspected it carefully before handing it over. Lorenzo opened the envelope with his letter opener. Inside rested a single photograph and one handwritten sentence. The photograph showed an elderly man sitting in a wheelchair outside the same stone cottage Bellini had revealed before his death, Vittorio Moretti, alive. But this time, another figure stood beside him, a woman wearing sunglasses and a white coat. Even from the grainy image, I recognized her instantly. Chiara Vitale. Lorenzo's expression darkened dangerously. Then he unfolded the note. "Come alone if you want the truth. Bring Emilia." My blood froze. Not Emma. Emilia. Lorenzo read the message twice before quietly burning it in the fireplace. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Protecting you." "Someone knows." "Exactly." He watched the paper turn to ash. And from this moment forward, only 3 people inside this estate know what Bellini believed. He looked at Dante, then at me. "It stays that way." I swallowed hard. "You're not taking me there." His eyes met mine steadily. "I don't intend to. The note specifically says I know what it says." His voice became firmer. "Which is precisely why you aren't leaving this house." I folded my arms despite everything. "You can't keep me prisoner." Lorenzo surprised me by smiling very slightly. "No." The smile disappeared as quickly as it came. "But I can keep you alive." Before I could answer, Rosa entered carrying an old cedar chest. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Signore." Lorenzo looked toward her. "What is it?" She placed the chest carefully on the desk. "I've been trying to remember since last night." Her wrinkled hands rested on the lid. "Anne asked me to keep this safe." My heartbeat accelerated. "My mother?" Rosa nodded. "She made me promise never to open it unless—" Her voice trembled. "Unless the girl came home." Silence filled the study. Lorenzo slowly lifted the lid. Inside rested a tiny white baby dress, a silver cross, several faded letters, and another sealed envelope addressed in elegant handwriting. To my daughter. Every breath left my body. Because my mother had written that letter. Not to Emma Carter, not to anyone else, simply to my daughter. The letter my mother left behind. My hands shook so badly that Lorenzo did not give me the envelope right away. He stood beside his desk in the gray light of dawn, holding the letter my mother had written years before her death, his dark eyes fixed on my face as if he was trying to decide whether truth would save me or break me beyond repair. The cedar chest sat open between us, filled with tiny relics of a life I could not remember. A white baby dress, a silver cross, faded letters, a blue ribbon, and the impossible name Emilia Moretti Belandi threaded through everything like a ghost. Rosa stood near the fireplace, wiping tears from her cheeks. Dante waited by the door with his arms folded, watching the corridor, as if death might walk in wearing a servant's coat. I hated that everyone looked at me, as though I had become fragile. I also hated that, for once, they might be right. "Give it to me," I whispered. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "You do not have to read it now." "Yes, I do, Emma. If you call me Emilia right now, I will throw that letter at your head." Dante coughed into his fist. Rosa made a small, horrified sound that might have been laughter. Lorenzo stared at me for one long second, and then, unbelievably, the corner of his mouth moved. Not enough to become a smile. Enough to remind me that even in the middle of a nightmare I was still alive. "Emma," he said carefully, placing the envelope in my hands. "Then read it as Emma." That nearly broke me before I opened it. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and lavender, 2 scents my mother had loved. Her handwriting appeared on the first page, familiar enough to make my chest ache. "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, then the life I tried to protect you from has finally found you. I am sorry." Those 2 words blurred immediately. I pressed the paper flat with trembling fingers and forced myself to continue. "I am sorry for the lies. I am sorry for every question I answered halfway, every photograph I hid, every nightmare I swallowed so you could sleep. But I will never be sorry for saving you. Your name at birth was Emilia Vittoria Moretti Belandi. You were born into a family that wanted you for power before they wanted you as a child. Your mother, Isabella, loved you desperately. Your father loved you too, though the world will try to make you believe he was only a secret. Vittorio Moretti trusted me with you because betrayal had entered the house, and because your life became the key to an inheritance powerful enough to destroy men who had built empires on greed. I did not steal you. I carried you out in the rain because Isabella begged me to, because Vittorio ordered it, and because someone inside the villa had already arranged your death. A sound escaped me. Lorenzo moved closer but did not touch me. I kept reading because stopping felt like drowning. They announced Emilia's death so the traitors would stop hunting. But some lies become cages. Vittorio promised he would expose the truth when it was safe. Then he disappeared. I was told he was dead. I never believed it. Bellini helped me escape, but I never fully trusted him. Trust Rosa if she is still alive. Trust no official records. Trust your own instincts. And if you meet Lorenzo, remember this. He was only a boy when all of this began. Do not let his family's sins become his face. My tears fell onto the paper. Lorenzo looked away, but not before I saw the pain cross his expression. My mother had known his name, had expected this moment, had reached across death to warn me not to hate him too quickly. That was exactly like her. Infuriatingly kind. The next lines made the room go silent around me. The man who truly threatens you is not Lorenzo. It is the one who profits if Lorenzo trusts the wrong woman. The Vitali alliance is poison. Chiara may not be the mastermind, but she knows more than she admits. If she brings you to the old cottage, do not go alone. The old cottage. Vittorio's photograph. Chiara standing beside him. The note, demanding Lorenzo bring Emilia. My pulse accelerated so fast I could feel it in my throat. I read the final paragraph aloud because my voice needed witnesses. My darling girl, I named you Emma because it means whole. I wanted you to grow into a life that was not split by bloodlines, wills, or men with guns. But if the truth finds you, do not shrink from it. You were never hidden because you were weak. You were hidden because too many powerful people were afraid of what you would become. The letter ended with the words she always whispered before bed. Be kind. Be brave. Come home to yourself. I lowered the paper slowly. No one spoke. Rosa cried openly now. Dante stared at the floor. Lorenzo remained very still, but his eyes were darker than before. Filled with fury, he was holding carefully away from me. She loved me, I said. Not to them exactly. To myself. Lorenzo answered quietly. Yes. She lied. Yes. Both are true. Yes. That simple honesty steadied me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, then looked at the photograph of Vittorio in the wheelchair, Chiara standing beside him in a white coat, her elegant hand resting on the chair like she owned the secret. We need to go to the cottage. Lorenzo's answer came instantly. No. I sighed through tears. You didn't even pretend to consider it. I considered it before you finished the sentence. The letter says not to go alone, not never go. Your mother did not know I would be alive to forbid it properly. That is the most Lorenzo answer possible. Good. He took the burned envelope from the desk and studied the seal on the outside. Dante. Dante looked up, already tracing the paper source and delivery route. And Chiara? Under surveillance. Lorenzo's face hardened. Bring her here. I stood. I want to speak to her. Absolutely not. You can't keep saying no to every useful idea I have. Watch me. Lorenzo. My voice cut sharper than I intended, and everyone in the room froze. He looked at me. I met his stare even though my knees still felt weak. This is my life. Silence. My mother. My name. My blood. My past. If Chiara knows something, I need to hear it from her face. For a moment, I thought he would command anyway. He wanted to. I saw it in the tension of his jaw, the way his hand flexed at his side, the instinctive need to put his body between me and every danger in Sicily. Then something changed. He exhaled slowly. Fine. Dante's eyebrows lifted. Rosa smiled through tears. I tried not to show how much that single word affected me. Not because he agreed, because it cost him something to trust me. With danger. Chiara Vitali arrived 30 minutes later wearing a cream silk dress, diamond earrings, and the expression of a woman who had spent the night calculating which lie would keep her alive. She entered Lorenzo's study with 2 guards behind her, glanced at the cedar chest, then at me, and for the first time since I had known her, fear crossed her face. Not disgust, not superiority, fear. So, she said softly, it is true. Lorenzo's voice was ice. What is true? Chiara looked at me. She has Isabella's eyes. The room went still. My breath caught. You knew? Chiara's mouth trembled once before she smoothed it away. I suspected. How long? Since the first week you worked here. The answer hit like a slap. You mocked me for almost a year while knowing I might be connected to this family? Her eyes flashed with shame and resentment. I mocked you because I was terrified. Of a maid? Of what your existence meant. Lorenzo stepped closer. Explain. Chiara swallowed. My father arranged the alliance because Vittorio's second succession clause blocked the transfer of several Moretti assets unless Lorenzo married outside the bloodline. Dante frowned. The public contract. Yes. She looked at Lorenzo. But if Emilia lived, the clause changed. The assets would pass to her trust, not through my family. So the Vitali fortune depends on Emilia staying dead, I said. Chiara looked away. Partly. And the cottage? Lorenzo asked. Chiara's face went pale. Who told you about that? He placed the photograph of her beside Vittorio on the desk. You did. Her composure cracked. I didn't hurt him. Where is he? Lorenzo demanded. Safe. Wrong answer. Chiara flinched. Then she turned to me unexpectedly. Your mother was right about one thing. I am not the mastermind. Then who is? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw terror bigger than her pride. My father. Silence. Carlo Vitali? Lorenzo asked. Chiara nodded. He found Vittorio alive 2 years ago. Vittorio had been hidden by men loyal to your mother. My father moved him to the old cottage, forced him to sign financial authorizations, and used his existence to pressure Bellini. Dante muttered a curse. Lorenzo's face had gone deadly calm. Why keep him alive? Because dead men cannot unlock old trusts. My stomach turned. Greed. Again. Always greed. And Bellini? I asked. Chiara's eyes filled briefly. Bellini was trying to bring proof to you before my father silenced him. Lorenzo turned toward the window. Rage held so tightly it seemed to change the room's temperature. I stepped closer to Chiara. Why tell us now? Chiara looked at me, and for once there was no cruelty in her expression. Only exhaustion. Because my father sent men to the cottage this morning. My pulse stopped. Lorenzo spun back. What? Chiara's voice broke. He doesn't need Vittorio anymore. Not now that Emma knows. The room exploded into movement. Dante shouted orders. Guards ran. Lorenzo grabbed his coat and weapon from the desk drawer. I stepped toward the door. He caught my arm gently but firmly. No. I looked up at him. My mother told me not to go alone. His eyes burned into mine. And I am telling you the cottage may already be under attack. Then Vittorio may die before he tells us the truth. I will get him. And if he refuses to speak to anyone but me? The question landed hard. Lorenzo's grip loosened slightly. Chiara whispered. He has been asking for Emilia for months. Silence. Lorenzo closed his eyes for one brief second. When he opened them, his expression was no longer only protective. It was resigned. You stay in the center vehicle. Lorenzo. That is not negotiable. I looked at Chiara. She's coming too. Chiara's eyes widened. What? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Why? Because if her father is there, she may be the only person who can distract him long enough to save Vittorio. Chiara stared at me as if I had just handed her a knife and a chance at redemption. Lorenzo looked like he hated every part of my logic. Then he nodded once. Fine. Within minutes we were racing along the coastal road beneath a pale Sicilian morning, 3 armored vehicles cutting through mist toward the old stone cottage where a dead man waited with the truth. My mother's letter rested inside my coat, warm against my heart. For the first time since the painting fell, I was not running from the name Emilia. I was walking toward it, and somewhere ahead the people who had tried to erase me were about to learn that hidden women do not stay hidden forever. The man who refused to die. The convoy raced along the winding coastal highway beneath a sky still bruised from the night's storm. 3 armored SUVs cut through the morning mist with headlights blazing, while Dante coordinated security teams over encrypted radio channels. I sat in the center vehicle exactly where Lorenzo had ordered me to remain. He occupied the seat beside me, silent, focused, one hand resting near the pistol beneath his jacket while his eyes continuously scanned the road ahead. Across from us, Chiara Vitali stared through the window with both hands clasped tightly in her lap. For the first time since I had met her, she looked less like the elegant heiress everyone feared, and more like a frightened daughter trapped between loyalty and conscience. No one spoke for several miles. Finally, I broke the silence. Why did your father keep Vittorio alive? Chiara answered without turning around. Control. Lorenzo's voice remained calm. Explain. She swallowed hard. The Moretti Empire was designed with layers of succession protections. Even after your father disappeared, certain trust accounts, shipping companies, and voting shares required biometric confirmation from the founder every few years. Dante looked back through the open partition. Which means Carlo Vitali couldn't simply forge everything forever. No. Chiara nodded slowly. He needed Vittorio alive enough to sign documents. My stomach tightened. He kept an old man prisoner for money. Chiara closed her eyes. For billions. Lorenzo looked out the windshield without changing expression. But I saw his jaw tighten. The calmness he carried had become something sharper than rage. It was purpose. 20 minutes later, the convoy left the coastal highway and followed a narrow gravel road climbing toward the cliffs overlooking the Mediterranean. The old stone cottage appeared exactly as it had in the photographs. Small, weathered, surrounded by ancient olive trees bending beneath the sea wind. Smoke drifted gently from the chimney. At first glance, it looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Lorenzo immediately raised one hand. Every vehicle stopped. Nobody moves. Dante studied the cottage through binoculars. No visible guards. Lorenzo frowned. That's the problem. He looked toward me. Stay inside. I already knew arguing would accomplish nothing. Fine. He studied my face for another second, apparently surprised by my cooperation. Really? For at least 30 seconds. Dante almost laughed. Lorenzo sighed. Progress. Security teams spread silently through the olive grove while Lorenzo and Dante advanced toward the cottage with 6 guards. I watched through the windshield, heart pounding. Chiara leaned slightly toward the glass. If my father knows we're coming, then why tell us? I asked quietly. She looked down at her hands. Because he stopped being my father a long time ago. Before I could answer, the front door of the cottage slowly opened. An elderly man stepped outside wearing a gray wool sweater over simple trousers. White hair moved gently in the sea breeze. Though thinner than in the photographs, he stood without assistance. Vittorio Moretti. Alive. Lorenzo stopped walking. Even from this distance, I could see something change inside him. 26 years of grief, anger, unanswered questions, and imagined conversations collapsed into one impossible moment. Vittorio looked directly at Lorenzo. Neither man spoke. Father and son stood separated by 20 meters of gravel and more than 2 decades of lies. Then Vittorio smiled faintly. You finally came. Lorenzo's voice carried across the courtyard. You let everyone believe you were dead. Vittorio lowered his eyes briefly. Yes. Mother buried an empty coffin. I know. I became head of this family because you disappeared. I know. Lorenzo took another step forward. Do you know what it cost? Vittorio's tired eyes filled with regret. Every day. Silence settled over the olive grove. Even the guards seemed reluctant to interrupt it. Finally, Lorenzo asked the only question that truly mattered. Why? Vittorio looked past him. Directly toward my vehicle, toward me. Because she had to live. My pulse accelerated. Lorenzo slowly turned to follow his father's gaze. Then he looked back at Vittorio. Emma? Vittorio nodded once. Bring her. Lorenzo remained motionless. No. The old man smiled sadly. Still protecting everyone. Always. Vittorio sighed. Just like your mother. My hand was already on the door handle before I realized what I was doing. Lorenzo noticed instantly. Emma! I stepped out anyway. He asked for me. Stay behind the guards. I will. Chiara quietly followed several steps behind us without speaking. As I approached the cottage, Vittorio's expression softened in a way I had never seen from anyone looking at me before. Not curiosity, not suspicion. Recognition. Tears gathered in his eyes. You have Isabella's smile, he whispered. I stopped several feet away. Did you know my mother? He shook his head gently. Anne? No. His voice trembled. Your first mother. My chest tightened painfully. I don't remember her. You were only 18 months old. Lorenzo looked between us. Father? Vittorio nodded slowly. You deserve the truth. He invited us inside. The cottage surprised me. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't even comfortable. Simple wooden furniture filled the small rooms. Medical equipment stood beside a worn armchair. Shelves overflowed with journals, legal documents, and faded photographs. Someone had lived here quietly for years, hidden, waiting. Vittorio poured tea with unsteady hands. Lorenzo automatically reached to help him. The gesture happened without thought. Father and son froze for just a moment before Vittorio quietly accepted the assistance. Thank you. Lorenzo didn't answer. We gathered around the old dining table. Vittorio placed one weathered journal before me. Your mother's. I opened it carefully. Isabella Moretti's elegant handwriting filled every page. My darling Amelia. The words blurred immediately. Vittorio watched me with quiet sadness. She wrote to you almost every day after you were born. She knew. My voice barely existed. That she might not survive? He nodded once. She discovered the conspiracy before we could stop it. Lorenzo leaned forward. What conspiracy? Vittorio's expression darkened. The Succession Council. Dante frowned. The council still exists? Unfortunately. Vittorio looked toward the window overlooking the sea. The Moretti family was never ruled by one man. It was guided by 7 families. Lorenzo stared at him. You never told me. Because I intended to dissolve it after exposing the corruption. Silence. Vittorio continued. Instead, they moved first. My heartbeat quickened. They wanted me dead? Vittorio met my eyes. No? Then why hide me? He hesitated. Because according to the original family charter, the first granddaughter born directly into the founding bloodline inherits controlling authority over the charitable trust, the educational foundation, and enough voting shares to block every criminal operation inside the organization. Nobody spoke. Vittorio's voice remained calm. You were never valuable, because of money. He looked directly at me. You were dangerous because you could legally dismantle everything they had built. My hands began trembling again. Lorenzo looked stunned. Why didn't you simply announce the truth? Vittorio laughed bitterly. Because by the time I understood the betrayal, he slowly rolled up his sleeve. A faded bullet scar crossed his upper arm. They had already tried to kill me twice. The room fell silent. Then Chiara quietly stood. Everyone turned toward her. She looked pale, terrified. We don't have much time. Dante's hand moved toward his weapon. Why? Chiara stared toward the front window. Because if my father learned I came here, a single gunshot shattered the cottage window. Glass exploded across the floor. Vittorio instinctively pushed me downward beneath the table, while Lorenzo drew his pistol before the sound had fully faded. Another volley of gunfire ripped through the walls. Dante shouted for everyone to take cover. Guards outside returned fire immediately. Chaos erupted. Lorenzo crouched beside me, one arm shielding my head from flying glass. Stay down! Vittorio struggled toward a cabinet near the fireplace. Lorenzo grabbed him. What are you doing? The old man pointed toward the hidden compartment beneath the cabinet. The charter! Another bullet tore through the wooden wall inches above us. Dust filled the room. Dante yelled from the doorway. 3 vehicles approaching. Chiara looked through the shattered window, and all color drained from her face. Not 3. Her voice cracked. 5. Lorenzo followed her gaze. Black SUVs raced up the gravel road through the olive grove, kicking up clouds of dust. The lead vehicle stopped hard in front of the cottage. The driver's door opened slowly. A tall, silver-haired man stepped out wearing an expensive navy suit despite the dirt road beneath his polished shoes. Carlo Vitale. He calmly adjusted his cufflinks before looking directly through the broken window at me. Then he smiled. Good morning, Amelia, he called almost pleasantly. Your family has kept me waiting for 26 years. The truth Carlo Vitale could not bury. Carlo Vitale stood calmly in the middle of the gravel driveway while bullets cracked through the olive trees around him, yet he behaved as though he had arrived for a business meeting instead of a siege. Behind him, heavily armed men spread across the hillside, using ancient stone walls for cover, as Lorenzo's security team returned fire from around the cottage. The Mediterranean shimmered peacefully beyond the cliffs, a cruel contrast to the violence unfolding beneath the morning sun. Lorenzo pushed me farther behind the heavy oak dining table as another burst of gunfire shattered the remaining kitchen windows. Stay here. I'm not hiding while everyone else, Emma. His voice stopped me instantly. Please. It was the first time he had said please instead of issuing an order. I looked into his eyes and saw something I had not expected from the man everyone called the most feared boss in Sicily. Fear. Not for himself. For me. I nodded once. Be careful. Something softened in his expression before he turned away. I intend to. Dante moved beside him, checking the magazine of his pistol. Rear exit? Lorenzo nodded. 2 teams circle left. I take the front. Vittorio slowly stood from his chair despite his age. No. Lorenzo turned immediately. Father, sit down. Carlo wants me alive. Until he doesn't. Vittorio shook his head. He came for the charter. Lorenzo looked toward the cabinet beneath the fireplace where the ancient document still remained hidden. Then he leaves without it. Another explosion rocked the cottage as one of the vehicles outside erupted into flames. Smoke poured through the shattered windows. Chiara flinched violently. He's escalating. Dante glanced outside. He's losing patience. Carlo's voice echoed calmly through a loudspeaker from outside. Lorenzo. Silence. You have 5 minutes. Lorenzo stepped carefully toward the broken window. Or what? Carlo smiled pleasantly from across the courtyard. Or the cottage becomes your father's tomb. Vittorio sighed, quietly behind us. He always preferred drama. Lorenzo ignored the remark. You murdered Bellini. Carlo shrugged. He became sentimental. You imprisoned my father. He refused to cooperate. You tried to murder a child. Carlo's smile disappeared completely. No. His eyes settled on me through the broken glass. I merely corrected an administrative mistake. My stomach turned. Administrative mistake. That was what he called the attempted murder of an 18-month-old girl. Lorenzo's hand tightened around his pistol so hard his knuckles turned white. Carlo noticed. Temper. Lorenzo answered softly. Control. Carlo laughed. Good. Your father taught you something useful. Before Lorenzo could reply, Vittorio unexpectedly walked into the open doorway despite everyone's protests. Enough, Carlo. Every weapon outside immediately shifted toward the old man. Carlo removed his sunglasses slowly. Vittorio, this ends today. Carlo sighed dramatically. It already should have ended 26 years ago. Vittorio stood straighter than I had seen him all morning. Anne saved Emilia because Isabella discovered your theft. Carlo's expression hardened. Careful. You forged trust documents before my daughter-in-law even died. Allegedly. You bribed council members. Successfully. You ordered the murder of a child. Carlo looked directly at me again, unsuccessfully. Silence swallowed the courtyard. Vittorio continued. Everything you built depended upon one lie. Carlo folded his hands behind his back. No. His voice remained remarkably calm. Everything I built depended upon competent planning. Lorenzo stepped beside his father. Then your planning ends now. Carlo shook his head slowly. You still don't understand. He removed a leather folder from inside his coat. Neither of you has legal authority. Dante frowned. Impossible. Carlo smiled again. Not after yesterday. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. Explain. Carlo opened the folder. Yesterday morning, your father signed complete financial authority to the Vitale Trust. Vittorio's face darkened. Forgery. Carlo casually handed the papers toward one of his attorneys standing nearby. Witnessed, notarized, recorded. Dante looked toward Vittorio. Did you sign anything? The old man closed his eyes briefly. Medication. Carlo answered for him. Morphine is a marvelous legal assistant. Lorenzo's expression became ice. You drugged him. Only enough to improve his cooperation. My pulse accelerated. Then everything is false. Carlo looked toward me. Legally? He smiled. Not unless Emilia Moretti appears alive before the court. Silence. Then he spread his arms slightly. Unfortunately, Emilia Moretti died 26 years ago. I stepped out from behind the doorway before anyone could stop me. Lorenzo immediately reached toward me. Emma, I gently moved past him. Carlo watched with obvious curiosity. There she is. My heartbeat pounded so loudly, I could barely hear my own voice. You spent 26 years hunting a baby. Carlo tilted his head. Not personally. You stole an old man's life. Business. You destroyed families. Necessary. You murdered people. Carlo shrugged, almost lazily. Expensive people. Every word strengthened something inside me instead of frightening me. My mother had hidden me so I could live without this darkness. But she had also written one final instruction. Be brave. I reached inside my coat and removed the letter she had left for me. My mother knew you would come. Carlo laughed. And Carter was clever. She was better than clever. I unfolded the final page. She left proof. Lorenzo looked toward me in surprise. Proof? I hadn't shown him everything. At the very bottom of the final page, beneath her farewell, my mother had written one final sentence in tiny handwriting I hadn't noticed until the drive to the cottage. If Carlo ever claims authority, show Vittorio the inside cover of Isabella's journal. Vittorio's eyes widened immediately. The journal. He hurried toward the dining table, opened Isabella's diary, and carefully lifted the leather cover. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside rested a sealed envelope bearing the original Moretti family crest. Carlo's smile disappeared. Completely. No. Vittorio removed the contents with trembling hands. An original succession charter. Signed, witnessed, sealed decades earlier. Lorenzo stared at the document. Father. Vittorio nodded slowly. This is the true charter. Carlo took one step forward. Destroy it! His men surged toward the cottage. Gunfire erupted instantly. Lorenzo's guards met them halfway across the courtyard while Dante dragged Vittorio back inside. Bullets ripped through the doorway as smoke and splintered wood filled the air. Carlo himself advanced several meters before Lorenzo stepped directly into his path. Neither man raised a weapon immediately. Move, Carlo said quietly. Lorenzo shook his head. No, she isn't your daughter. No. Lorenzo's voice remained steady. She's something more important. Carlo frowned. What? Lorenzo looked back at me for one brief second, before facing Carlo again. She's family. The single word changed everything. Something inside me that had been fractured since the painting fell finally began fitting together again. I wasn't only Emma Carter. I wasn't only Amelia Moretti. I was both. My mother's daughter, Isabella's daughter, Anne's daughter in every way that mattered. Lorenzo's family not because of blood alone, but because every choice since the gallery had been made to protect rather than possess me. Carlo recognized the shift too. His expression darkened. Sentiment. Lorenzo calmly drew his pistol. Conviction. Carlo reached for his own weapon at exactly the same moment. Before either man could fire, a deafening roar echoed across the cliffs. Helicopters. 3 black government helicopters swept over the coastline, descending rapidly toward the olive grove. Sirens followed from the road below as dozens of police vehicles climbed toward the cottage. Dante looked through the broken window in disbelief. Who called them? Vittorio smiled faintly. I did. Everyone turned toward him. The old man calmly held up an antique satellite emergency transmitter hidden beneath the table. Yesterday. Carlo's face finally showed genuine fear. Vittorio looked at him with quiet sadness. You spent 26 years controlling a dead man's silence. The helicopters landed around the estate, officers pouring across the hillside while loudspeakers ordered everyone to drop their weapons. Carlo glanced toward the forest, calculating escape routes, but every path was already blocked. Lorenzo slowly lowered his pistol without taking his eyes off him. It's over. Carlo looked toward me one final time. Hatred replaced confidence. Not yet. Then, before anyone expected it, he reached inside his jacket not for a gun, but for a small black remote control. My blood froze. Vittorio's face lost all color. No. Carlo smiled one last time. If I lose the inheritance. His thumb settled over the button. No one keeps the cottage. The choice that changed the Moretti family. Time slowed the instant Carlo Vitali's thumb settled over the black remote. Lorenzo moved before anyone else even understood what was happening. He lunged across the room, driving Carlo sideways as the remote slipped from his hand. At the same moment, Dante tackled one of Carlo's armed men through the shattered front doorway, while government officers stormed the courtyard from every direction. Gunfire erupted once more, echoing across the cliffs like thunder. I instinctively grabbed Vittorio's arm and pulled him behind the heavy stone fireplace, just as another window exploded inward. Splinters showered across the room. Chiara dropped to the floor beside us, covering her head with trembling hands. The black remote bounced across the wooden floor, spinning until it struck the leg of the dining table. Every eye followed it. Carlo saw it first. Even while struggling beneath Lorenzo's weight, he stretched desperately toward it. Lorenzo caught his wrist, twisting hard enough to force the older man to release a cry of pain. "It's over," Lorenzo shouted. Carlo laughed through clenched teeth. "Not until she's dead." The hatred in his voice froze my blood. He wasn't thinking about the inheritance anymore. He wasn't thinking about money. He wanted me erased simply because I existed. Dante fired one precise shot that shattered the remote into pieces before Carlo's fingertips could reach it. Plastic fragments scattered across the floor. Silence followed. Carlo stared at the broken device in disbelief. Then the old cottage remained standing. Nothing exploded. Lorenzo looked toward the shattered remains of the remote and immediately understood. It was a bluff. Carlo slowly smiled despite the handcuffs already closing around his wrists. Half a bluff. Vittorio's face suddenly changed. The cellar. Lorenzo turned instantly. "What?" Vittorio struggled to his feet. "The real explosives are beneath the wine cellar." My heartbeat jumped. Dante swore under his breath. Government bomb technicians who had just entered the cottage immediately rushed downstairs. Every second stretched endlessly until one of them shouted from below. "Confirmed!" My pulse nearly stopped. "Multiple explosive charges," another officer yelled back. "Active timer." Lorenzo's expression hardened. "How long?" The answer came only seconds later. 6 minutes. Chaos exploded once again. Officers evacuated the cottage while bomb technicians disappeared beneath the floorboards carrying equipment. Dante coordinated security teams outside. Chiara helped the elderly Vittorio toward the front door. I remained frozen for one terrible second, staring at the journals, the hidden charter, my mother's letter, and Isabella's diary still lying across the dining table. Lorenzo noticed immediately. "Emma!" I looked toward the papers. My mother's letter. He understood before I finished speaking. Without another word, he crossed the room, swept every document into a leather satchel, and returned to my side. Now, we ran together into the bright Mediterranean sunlight just as bomb disposal teams sealed off the cottage. Officers forced Carlo into an armored police vehicle despite his continued protests. He looked directly at me one final time through the window. "You think you've won?" I didn't answer. I no longer needed to. 15 endless minutes later, the lead bomb technician emerged from the cellar covered in dust and sweat. Safe. Relief swept through the entire hillside. Some officers laughed quietly. Others simply sat on the ground breathing again. Lorenzo lowered his head briefly, releasing a breath I wasn't sure he had been holding. Without thinking, I reached for his hand. Only after my fingers closed around his did I realize what I had done. He looked down at our joined hands, then back at me. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Somehow silence said enough. Vittorio watched us from beneath the shade of an olive tree, and for the first time since I had met him, he smiled without sadness. "Your mother would approve," he murmured softly. I looked away, embarrassed. Lorenzo almost smiled. Almost. 3 days later, the Moretti estate no longer resembled the fortress I had first entered as an invisible housekeeper. Police investigators filled the West Gallery, documenting hidden compartments. Financial investigators seized Carlo Vitali's companies. Bellini's testimony, combined with Vittorio's journals and the original succession charter, dismantled decades of corruption inside the secret council. Newspapers across Italy carried headlines about organized crime, fraudulent inheritances, and one elderly businessman who had secretly survived for 26 years. My name never appeared. Lorenzo made certain of that. Why? I asked him one evening as we stood overlooking the lavender fields where all of this had begun. Because the world spent 26 years trying to take your peace. He looked toward the setting sun rather than at me. I won't help them. I smiled sadly. I'm not sure peace exists anymore. It will. His certainty surprised me. How can you know? He finally met my eyes. Because we'll build it. We stood together in comfortable silence until Rosa called us inside for dinner. The villa no longer felt cold. Servants laughed again. Fresh flowers filled the halls. The burned gallery had already begun restoration. Vittorio insisted on supervising every repair himself, despite everyone's objections. Chiara remained temporarily at the estate, cooperating fully with investigators. She apologized to me more than once. I forgave her slowly, not because she deserved it immediately, but because my mother had taught me that forgiveness was stronger when earned honestly. 1 week later, Lorenzo asked me to meet him inside the restored nursery. The room looked almost exactly as it had before the fire, except sunlight now filled it through newly opened windows overlooking the sea. The old rocking horse had been repaired. The blue wallpaper carefully restored. Isabella's photograph stood upon the fireplace beside one of Anne Carter's, smiling with me as a child. Lorenzo held a small wooden box. This belonged to my mother. He handed it to me. Inside rested the silver lily locket, polished until it shone once again. It belongs with you. Tears filled my eyes immediately. I can't. You can. His voice remained quiet. My mother wanted Amelia protected. He smiled gently. Anne raised Emma. He closed the box inside my hands. Both deserve to be remembered. I looked down at the locket, then back at him. I don't know who I am anymore. Lorenzo took one slow step closer. Yes, you do. I frowned. Do I? You're the woman who risked her life for people she had every reason to walk away from. Another step. You're the daughter Anne chose every single day. Another. You're the granddaughter Vittorio never stopped searching for. He stopped directly in front of me. And you're the woman who reminded this family what loyalty actually looks like. My throat tightened painfully. That's a lot for one person. No. His eyes softened. It's exactly enough. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, very gently, he reached up and tucked one loose strand of chestnut hair behind my ear. Such a tiny gesture. So much tenderness inside it. Emma, he whispered. I looked into his eyes. Yes? There's something I should have said the night the painting fell. My heartbeat quickened. What? He smiled, small but genuine this time. I'm very glad you decided to straighten a crooked frame. Home was never a place. 6 months later, the Moretti estate no longer carried the weight of whispered conspiracies and hidden betrayals. The burned West Gallery had been restored, but one section of the wall remained uncovered behind protective glass. Lorenzo insisted the hidden compartment stay exactly as it had been discovered. So we never forget what silence can cost, he had said during the restoration. Visitors believed it was an artistic memorial. Only a handful of people knew it marked the place where an ordinary housekeeper had uncovered the truth that changed an entire family forever. Carlo Vitale and the surviving members of the corrupt succession council were convicted after months of investigations. Bellini's testimony, Vittorio's journals, the original succession charter, Isabella's diary, Anne Carter's letters, and decades of hidden financial records dismantled an empire built on fraud. Newspapers called it the largest organized crime inheritance scandal in modern Italian history. My name remained absent from every headline. Lorenzo kept his promise. To the world, I was simply Emma Carter, a private citizen who valued peace more than publicity. To the people who truly mattered, I was also Amelia Moretti Belandi. The granddaughter Isabella had died trying to protect, the child Anne had chosen to raise with unconditional love, and the woman who finally reunited a broken family. I visited my mother's grave every Sunday morning. The first time Lorenzo came with me, he remained several respectful steps behind while I placed fresh white lilies beside her headstone. I finally know why you lied, I whispered, tracing the engraved letters of her name with my fingertips. And I finally understand that every lie you told was another way of saying you loved me. A gentle breeze carried the scent of lavender across the cemetery. I smiled through quiet tears. You gave me 2 lives, one to survive, one to remember. When I stood, Lorenzo silently handed me a handkerchief. You always carry one? I asked with a faint smile. After meeting you, his own smile appeared. Always. We laughed together for the first time without fear following close behind. Vittorio slowly rebuilt his relationship with Lorenzo one conversation at a time. Some wounds could never disappear completely, but forgiveness found room to grow where honesty finally lived. Every evening they played chess on the western terrace overlooking the sea. Sometimes they argued over old family decisions. Sometimes they spoke of Isabella. Sometimes they simply enjoyed the silence that no longer needed to hide secrets. Rosa became the unquestioned heart of the estate. She refused every offer of retirement, claiming someone still had to make certain Lorenzo remembered to eat whenever work consumed him. Dante eventually admitted that no security system in Sicily could match Rosa's ability to discover everyone's business before breakfast. Even Chiara found her own path toward redemption. She testified against her father despite knowing it would destroy the Vitali fortune forever. She sold nearly everything she inherited and established a foundation supporting children who had lost parents to organized crime. The first donation she made was anonymous. The second carried only one sentence. For Ann Carter, who proved that love is stronger than blood. One quiet autumn afternoon, I returned to the restored nursery alone. Sunlight streamed through the open windows exactly as it had the day Lorenzo gave me the silver lily locket. Isabella's photograph rested beside Anne's smiling portrait on the fireplace, neither woman larger than the other. I realized then that my heart had finally stopped choosing between them. One had given me life, the other had taught me how to live it. They belonged together. I gently placed fresh white flowers beneath both photographs. "Thank you," I whispered. The floor creaked softly behind me. I smiled without turning around. "You're becoming easier to recognize." Lorenzo chuckled quietly. "I was hoping to surprise you. You breathe differently than everyone else. Is that a compliment?" "I haven't decided yet." He joined me beside the fireplace, his gaze resting on the two photographs. "They would both be proud." I nodded. "I hope so." He reached into his jacket and produced a small velvet box. My eyebrows lifted immediately. "Lorenzo, before you panic. That doesn't sound encouraging. This isn't a proposal." I relaxed enough to laugh. Good, because I wasn't emotionally prepared to faint today. His smile widened as he opened the box. Inside rested an antique silver key attached to a small engraved tag. West Garden. I looked at him in confusion. "The old greenhouse?" He nodded. "You once told Rosa you missed working with flowers." I remembered saying it months earlier while believing no one important had been listening. Apparently Lorenzo had been. "The greenhouse belongs to you now," he said quietly. "No conditions, no obligations, no hidden contracts behind paintings." My eyes filled unexpectedly. "You remembered." "I remember everything about the woman who changed my life by straightening one crooked frame." I accepted the key slowly. "Thank you. There's one more thing." He led me outside through the western gardens where olive trees swayed gently beneath the afternoon sun. Beyond the restored greenhouse stretched several acres of neglected land, now transformed into rows of white lilies, lavender, roses, and wildflowers overlooking the Mediterranean cliffs. Workers quietly stepped aside as we approached. A simple wooden sign stood at the entrance. Anne and Isabella Memorial Gardens. I could no longer stop the tears. Lorenzo looked almost nervous. "Too much?" I shook my head immediately. "No." My voice trembled. "It's perfect." We walked slowly through the flowers together. Butterflies drifted lazily between blooming lavender. Children from nearby villages laughed while helping gardeners plant new trees as part of the estate's community program. The Moretti property no longer inspired fear. It had become a place where people arrived without lowering their voices. We stopped overlooking the sea where the cliffs dropped into sparkling blue water. Lorenzo leaned lightly against the old stone wall. "There's something my father told me yesterday." I turned toward him. "What?" He smiled softly. "He said our family spent generations believing inheritance meant receiving land, money, or power." He looked toward the memorial garden stretching behind us. "Then you arrived and reminded us that the greatest inheritance is becoming the kind of person someone would risk everything to protect." I lowered my eyes, overwhelmed. "Anne already gave me that." "She did." His voice became gentler. "Now it's your turn to pass it on." I slipped the silver lily locket around my neck. The afternoon sunlight caught its polished surface, sending tiny reflections dancing across the garden path. One locket, two mothers, one life finally made whole. I looked toward the horizon where sea met sky, then back at the man standing quietly beside me. "You know," I said with a smile, "I'm still glad I decided to straighten that crooked painting." Lorenzo laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. "So am I." We stood together in peaceful silence while waves rolled endlessly against the cliffs below, carrying away the echoes of old betrayals and leaving behind only hope. Sometimes the greatest treasures are never hidden inside vaults, fortunes, or secret wills. Sometimes they are hidden inside ordinary acts of kindness performed by ordinary people who have no idea they are changing history. My name is Emma Carter. My name is Emilia Moretti Belandi. One name was given to me by birth. The other was given to me by love. And in the end, I learned that family is not defined by the blood that claims you, but by the hearts that refuse to let you go. Thank you for listening to our story. May you never underestimate the quiet courage of ordinary people, because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one carrying the truth that changes everything forever. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable mafia romance stories filled with mystery, redemption, and second chances. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you discovered a secret that changed your entire identity? Your support helps us continue bringing these emotional stories to life. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.